program for graduate studies at Charles Darwin University. Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon. I'm the Dean of Graduate Studies at Charles Darwin University, and welcome to this Touchstone session exploring iThenticate for PhD students and supervisors. Until very recently, theses were not put through text matching software, so students and supervisors never knew if an examiner would find academic misconduct and plagiarism, or indeed questioning of authorship and the discovery of research misconduct. So as part of the milestone program at Charles Darwin University, we're using text matching software, not as a hammer to hit PhD students over the head, but we're using it as a diagnostic. At every milestone, so that's once a year, students will run at least one document through iThenticate. We're doing all of this so that plagiarism is not a deal breaker that's discovered by examiners. It's a learning-led proxy to ensure that students gain expertise in academic and research integrity. So this is part of research training, research education. It is part of our job to configure a pathway for an ethical researcher. There is a very, very small academic literature about the use of text matching software in doctoral education, particularly as a diagnostic rather than as a penalty. But I do need to acknowledge Eison's research. Eison used Turnitin to examine 384 PhD dissertations from Canada and the United States. The goal was to discover if theses submitted before 1994, and of course that is the proliferation of the internet in research, whether those theses before 1994 had a lower evidence of plagiarism. In other words, the research question was, has plagiarism in doctoral theses increased through the proliferation of the internet and online sources in doctoral education? Fascinating project. So what did Eison discover? Of the theses they assessed, they discovered that half of the submitted and examined dissertations, quote, contained evidence of plagiarism, end of quote. And that figure, half, was a constant through the historical period. In other words, plagiarism did not increase as online searching increased. It remains an historical problem. The research that we have shows that doctoral plagiarism is pervasive. Okay, well, let's now unfold into the next part of the research. And I want to acknowledge Alistair McCulloch's research in this area and his fine article showing that too often for HDR students and supervisors, our thinking about plagiarism is binarised. I want to acknowledge the leadership of the University of South Australia in this area. Their research in this field for decades, I would argue, has been world-leading. But Alistair confirmed that we too often binarise academic integrity in doctoral education between, quote, policing malpractice, end of quote, or, quote, improving research writing, end of quote. So let's move away from policing students and focus on ethics, integrity and improvement. Text matching software like Turnitin or iThenticate is best used in doctoral education as formative assessment, formative tools to improve academic writing. So again, let's look at the research. McCulloch et al.'s research into the HDR candidates and supervisors at the University of South Australia and their use of iThenticate is important. They showed the role of academic staff and supervisors in enabling the information literacy, academic integrity and research integrity of their students. They showed that the academic staff who did not use iThenticate could not see why it existed and why it was being recommended for doctoral education. So people without professional and personal experience denied and devalued that personal and professional experience in their HDR students. The research also showed different patterns between supervisors and students. The academic staff that did use it put pieces through the system once. HDR students submitted and resubmitted the same piece to look at the diagnostic changes. Students particularly submitted introductions and literature reviews early in their studies. Therefore, their research showed that for HDR students, iThenticate enabled the development of writing and understanding research integrity. Therefore, text matching software is best positioned not as a punitive system, but as formative assessment. It is an educational tool to improve research writing. Therefore, this is a positive moment to transform the student, and we hope the scholar's, attitude to research integrity. So let's talk about iThenticate. iThenticate is a corporate text matching service. It's owned by plagiarism.org, and they also own Turnitin. Now, this is important to recognise. There is a business in making money out of the folk devil of plagiarism. This is not a public utility. This is not a service. Universities and journals have to purchase the right for the use of this software. And I approve the purchase of this for CDU. It is a huge financial commitment for universities and for journals. iThenticate and Turnitin are not benevolent, vegan public services. They are corporations that feed off the fear of plagiarism. iThenticate was released in 2004, but it was the less popular and less visible option when compared to Turnitin. Turnitin dominates undergraduate education. It is the Toyota Celica of plagiarism detection services. iThenticate is the Lexus of plagiarism detection services. Universities are not the only audience or consumers of iThenticate. The World Health Organization, the World Bank, the UN uses iThenticate. Commercial and academic journals use iThenticate. It has also been trialled through a series of innovations that are profoundly useful for researchers and PhD students. Let me talk about one crucial innovation in iThenticate. And it really changed my life, to be frank, as a researcher, as a supervisor, but also as a dean who has to manage academic and research integrity cases. iThenticate enables document-to-document analysis. What this means is you can enter a document and compare the overlap with another document. And this stops all the talk of someone saying, oh, he ripped me off, she ripped me off. Well, we can actually look at it now. And one document can be uploaded and compared directly with another. Text matching software, of course, is only as good as its database, and iThenticate has the largest and fastest growing database in the world. It works in multiple languages, it has very, very strong full disciplinary coverage, and it also has the capacity to manage equations, which is particularly important for our colleagues in mathematics and physics. iThenticate has 4 databases that it uses. It checks through its premium scholarly publications database. 96% of the top scholarly journals are included in this database. That is 82 million refereed articles. The second database is the Internet Archive, comparing a document to current and archived web pages. That is 90 plus billion web pages, with 22 million pages being added every day. They're also comparing against the ProQuest database of dissertations and theses. Over 1 million dissertations and theses are checked in 35 languages. The fourth database is the private repository. This is the amazing one. We can add specific documents and compare them. So if I'm managing a plagiarism case, I upload the student's work or the supervisor's work and the paper that has been charged with plagiarising this object, and I can do a direct and bespoke comparison between 2 or more documents. Importantly, 1,500 global publishers are now using iThenticate as part of their manuscript screening. It is an intuitive database, and unlike Turnitin, iThenticate does not save a document to add to their database. That's what's always made me uncomfortable with Turnitin. Students would upload their thesis for checking, and they'd just forget to click the draft mode, and the thesis would become part of the Borg cube. So the thesis would then go on to be used by Turnitin to build their database and continue to make money. iThenticate does not do that. The student, the researcher, all of us maintain control over our uploads. Our work is not saved to the Borg cube. The results at the University of South Australia confirmed that when asked, 89% of HDR candidates said that iThenticate helped them prevent plagiarism. 64% of academic staff reported that it helped them prevent plagiarism in their students' writing. Half of the academic staff also admitted that it helped them prevent plagiarism in their own writing. So this is formative learning. This is moving students from detection of possible plagiarism to thinking about their academic writing in different ways. Indeed, at the University of South Australia, 80% of staff and students agreed that iThenticate had improved their writing. This consciousness has been created because the development of high-quality research writing emerges when we recognise the inadvertent plagiarism through poor paraphrasing. 85% of UniSA staff and students confirmed that iThenticate improved paraphrasing skills. Now, I know this was a very small survey based with students in a small state in Australia. And this leads me to my final few comments for us at CDU about iThenticate for PhD students and supervisors. And my first comment is ignore the number. Too often, this is a leftover from the use of text matching in undergraduate education. The percentage of the match, the big scary red number at the top of the report, was seen to be meaningful. Actually, the number is not really meaningful. Students and supervisors need to go through every line of the text, check every sentence, and check the findings of the software. So, for example, we may find a match of 1%, and we go, oh, it's only 1%. But that 1% may be all in one paragraph of a PhD, and where the student thought they were paraphrasing, they'd actually plagiarised. So that 1% really matters. You may have a match of 77%, but you've accidentally included the quotations, that is, properly referenced quotations, and you've included your bibliography reference list in the search. Now, by the way, you can click in iThenticate. You can organise the parameters so that you can exclude quotes and exclude the reference list. But you also may have a high percentage of matching because our students have published from their thesis. Now, the management of self-plagiarism, as it's now described, is a separate issue, and we'll cover that in another touchstone. But some journals use what are described as cut-off criteria for desk rejection. So a percentage of matches is the cut-off criteria. Therefore, and of course that's wrong, therefore we need to begin and sustain this information integrity discussion today, tomorrow, next year, so that we use software as a formative diagnostic, not as a summative decision or judgment without expertise or interpretation. We could focus on plagiarism and collusion, but instead, let's use iThenticate to teach the foundational skills that examiners expect. Information literacy is the capacity to locate information, but also identify the type, mode or genre of information, evaluate and analyse information, and apply that information in a new context to a new problem or topic. For PhD students, information literacy is part of academic integrity. For us as PhD supervisors, we are verifying that students have a diversity of sources, including the very current as much as the historically significant. We also need to confirm that students can interpret these sources and they're not simply endlessly quoting or paraphrasing. They are analysing and evaluating these sources with rigour, precision, innovation and creativity, and our students are using the sources with respect. One goal, and there are many, that is important within a doctoral program is that we're graduating ethical, independent and responsible researchers. but these are learned skills. So let us as supervisors value information literacy and the formative assessment tools like iThenticate to enable student development. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to Touchstones, our professional development program for graduate studies at Charles Darwin University.